Yeah, no, I was just going to say it's good that we're living up to the stereotype, eh? Rugby on the iPad on the go, or building biltong boxes. No, all good this end as well. Like you, I'm glad that the lockdown's slowly getting there. Pubs opening and things. That's a big step forward for all of us. I think the end is in sight here. I hope, but obviously thoughts go out to the people in South Africa, and the hope is that the third wave doesn't hit too badly, and obviously everyone around the world just hoping to get through this thing.
So let's start with the Gallagher Prem. Sale and Exeter were back to winning ways after they both, left Europe. That game at the end, I think personally one of my favorite games of the weekend, which was Bath against Leicester. So
I jump in quickly on the Saints game as well. Just
okay.
just from a not a South African point of view, but just how good was Dan Bigger in that game?
Oh yes.
I think that's one of the things which is sort of becoming clearer is actually a lot of people sort of wrote him off in terms of line selection. But I think that he ran that back line so well and just controlled the game magnificently. And you're right to say that I think Saints took a bit of a hammering when Quibus Reinach left. I mean, I'm not attributing everything to him. I mean, he's a brilliant player. But having said that, you could see that they were struggling after he left, and they were sort of finding their way a bit, and they seemed a bit lost. But good to see them hitting their straps. They're another one of those teams that when they turn it on, they can turn it on. They've got some real talent there. A guy like Dave Ribbons is another fantastic player. But yeah, it was amazing to see Dan Bigger play so well, and I think that his name is one that will definitely be in Lions discussion for me anyway. It's between him and Owen Farrell, and I know that's going to piss off a lot of players, a lot of people, a lot of fans are basically expecting Gatland to go, oh, you have to go for Finn Russell because you want to play this attacking rugby, and we'll come on to talking about the style that the Lions are going to play. But for me, I think that Gatland's probably going to choose either Farrell or Dan Bigger, as upset as I'm sure that's going to make a lot of people.
One person in that game that sort of helped improve or sort of exploit Dan Bigger's talent was the 9, Alex Mitchell. I think that he had an exceptional game. He's definitely a call-up, I think, for England. And as a Springbok fan, we keep an eye open for all these opposition players or players from opposing countries, and he impressed me a lot this weekend too. I think his link up with Dan Bigger, as you said, was it was out of this world, and they really put London Irish to the test, and they did a great job. And I read an article sort of breaking down Alex Mitchell, something that some of the other England nines or Lion nines won't be able to bring. Finally, this Sale are back to winning ways. It wasn't the best game for Sale. I mean, although Alex Henderson said that was his best performance, or that was his most impressive performance, but Gloucester came. They came with intent, and they were quite annoying at times. I think they had momentum for most of the game. Neither team sort of capitalized on opportunities. I think Sale, they turned opportunity into error a little too much. We got away with a couple penalties. But then again, another red card this weekend, Rob de Preer. I mean, he immediately knew he did it, didn't he? When you saw that tackle.
You were surprised. I mean, as you say, I'm glad that you slipped in the we there when you talk about Sale, just to make sure no one's under any illusions who you support. But no, I mean, credit to Sale. I can understand why Sanderson would say it was his best performance in charge, and I think it's because they're playing for a large portion of the game with 14 men, and it's a pretty critical position as well that they that sort of Rob de Preer fills a very crucial role in the backline for them. So yeah, I mean, good they got the win. There were bits of the game where they looked really dominant, as you say, but Gloucester, you pointed it out. Gloucester really came for them, and Gloucester are a good side. And we forget sometimes, even though Gloucester's sort of hugging the bottom of the table and have had their issues this season, they have so much talent at their disposal. If you think that back line, Chris Harris is a Lions potential bolter. Mark Atkinson is one of the most underrated inside centres in England, for my mind. And then just the wings, obviously Johnny May and Louis Rees-Zammit, so that's one hell of a backline. And Ed Slater in the second row is a really good player as well. So I think the frustration that Gloucester fans feel is that they have quite a good squad, actually. They have a serious top 6 squad potential, absolutely. And it's just not really gelling for them. And, it was a golden opportunity against a 14-man Sale. So I'm sure their issues are continuing. I guess the optimists within the Gloucester fan base say we're building week on week, and it's a process, and I understand that as well because they've recycled coaches a fair bit. So we'll see where they go. Good for Sale to get back on well, on the winning horse, as you say, after being dumped out of Europe. But yeah, I mean, a few standouts for me in that game from Sale. Dan du Preez, I think I've been a long time admirer. I always talk about him. I think he was outstanding. I really, really do. So I mean, there's an interesting clip that BT Sport put up this morning. I think it was just sort of a loose, hectic 2.5 minutes between Gloucester and Sale, and it was all out attacking rugby. But just watch that clip closely and analyze the work that Dan du Preez does in that. You know, he's used in the space of 2 minutes as a big sort of carrying option, gets over the game line, deft offloading to keep the ball alive. But his defensive work rate is, again, something that I always mention. And he tracks back and makes an outstanding cover tackle, I think, on Valrapava Ruskin at one point. So no, I mean, go watch the clip for yourselves, or maybe we can put it up or whatever. But either way, I think Dan du Preez had a fantastic game. He was just dominant in a way that we saw missing against La Rochelle last week. So another one who's really putting his hand up. But it was a fun game, I have to say. I enjoyed it tremendously.
It wasn't as fun for me, I'm not going to lie, but it was in the end. You know, we can argue that we should have maybe gone for the bonus point. I don't know, but ultimately the priority in that game was to get the win. I think 4 points at this crucial stage in the competition was more than enough. You know, nobody's going to catch Bristol. I can't see that happening. You know, Exeter are showing flair again. You know, they are double champions. So, but I mean, if Sale focus on at the game at hand, which they did, you know, I really expected a little bit more from, you know, Louis Rees-Zammit. I must admit, you know, we all know what he can do. We saw it in the Six Nations. I was expecting to see a little bit more from him in that game, but, you know, I'm kind of glad he didn't, you know, pick up the paces, and we were able to manage him on the wing. You mentioned Ed Slater. He was phenomenal for Gloucester, and a very rare error put us back into in a prime position in the game, because if it wasn't for him sort of having a little play around on the floor with the ball, that try would have stood, and, you know, they would have had the lead and probably continued with that momentum. And they were actually playing a lot better against us with 15. And then when Rob went off, you know, it was tight the whole way through. You know, it was 12-8, I think, at halftime. And eventually we got away with the point. So yeah, congrats to Sale. Exeter, I mean, I'm actually still in awe of how good Stuart Hogg is. Like, I mean, I can't for the life of me understand why what would not be the number one pick for the Lions. Again, you know, a bit of individual brilliance in that game. What did you make of the Exeter win?
Yeah, I think I'll talk a bit about Stuart Hogg, because I mean, Exeter were classy, they were composed, and they did a job. And I mean, that's almost all you need to say about their performance as a collective. But yeah, touching upon Stuart Hogg, as you say, I completely agree with you. There's no world in which he isn't the starting 15 for the Lions. Which is interesting, actually, because there's been an article today which has come out, and I think it's Stuart Barnes has written that he doesn't rate him as a starting line, or he's a potential liability, which is just the biggest load of nonsense I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I understand that journalists often write things to elicit a reaction. I mean, it's part and parcel of the industry, but I mean, it's just a really, really bad take. He's an enormously important player for Scotland, for Exeter, and will be for the Lions. Not only because he has this, you know, attacking flair and has just a seeming ability to glide past tacklers, but also because he just controls the game so well. His boot is so underrated, and I think people are starting to wake up to it, that he has sort of a reputation for this flair and this counter-attacking ability, but actually he's a brilliant game manager. He's got an enormous boot. He can give you territory on clearances. He can pin players back. He kicks very well for the corners. And that's exactly the type of game plan that Gatland's going to play against South Africa. Again, we'll come on to talking about the Lions more specifically in a bit. But yeah, Stuart Hogg was phenomenal. I mean, that's pretty much all there is for me to say about that particular game.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it really well. Like, he reads the game a lot better than most players do, and there was an example of that in his try. You know, the game sort of had a breaking sort of gameplay. You know, he immediately identified that the Wasps' defense was sort of just sleeping. You know, and Gabriel Ogre sort of had no idea what was coming. Stuart Hogg, you know, pops over a spiral ball, chases his own kick down, and he's still got speed even at that height. You know, I mean, I think people are sort of, I don't know why people are attacking Scottish players with their heights and their size. But I mean, anyway, they're proving them wrong, put it that way. And then we obviously get on to, in my opinion, sorry, before we get onto the Bath and Leicester game, again, Harlequins, loads of Saffa scoring there again. You know, we need to congratulate Wilco Low on scoring his first try for the Harlequins. I know that meant a lot to him personally, and it does to us as the fans. You know, Tyrone Green just doing what he's doing week in, week out, and he's just, you know, putting that name or his name into Springbok contention for sure. And then, of course, Andre Estesen, who scored off a beautiful run by Danny Kerr. He was so selfless. I even tweeted about that. I said, you know, it's incredibly selfless. Danny Kerr as well, you know, he's just been so consistent, and what he's doing at Quins. And yeah, 3 Saffas scoring. They put 50 points up against Worcester, and you know, Worcester are having an absolute nightmare. Did you watch much of the Quins game?
Yeah, I did. So I managed to watch the whole Quins game. And what I'd say as well is we talk a lot about Bristol and their sort of attacking flair and their particularly their strength in the back line. But name me a more on fire backline at the moment than that Quins backline. You know, you look actually 9 to 15. Every single one of them is tearing it up. You know, Danny Kerr is playing the best rugby he's played in years at 9. He's you know, a lot of people touting him as a potential Lions bolter. You've got Marcus Smith, who's just a freak at the moment, to be honest with you. Andre Estesen is having the best season of rugby he's ever played. Obviously, we said Tyrone Green has been an absolute revelation. Mike Brown, unfortunately, we have discussed him, but he's been playing incredible rugby. And even like Marchand at 13, Northmore when he comes on, these guys, Louis Lynott playing so well earlier this season. I think that Quins backline is absolutely tearing it up, and credit to them. They're playing really attractive rugby as well, and it's good for neutrals to watch. It's good for Quins fans to watch, obviously. But yeah, I think also special mention to Wilco Low. You mentioned a little bit earlier on. It's his first try for Quins, and he's been so sturdy and so solid for them in the scrum there, and he's forming a really good partnership with Joe Marler as well. So no, credit to them. I think Quins have the potential to be dark horses in this competition. Make no mistake. I think Sale for me as the other top 4 side. I mean, you mentioned Bristol, or no one's going to catch them. Exeter pretty secure of making it, and then I think the other 2 at the moment. So Sale and Quins. I think they're probably going to stay in the top 4. But I think for me, I think Quins are more likely to go all the way. If I'm honest, Sale tend to blow a bit hot and cold for me, and maybe they're a season or so out. But Quins just seem to be on this rampage almost, and really they should have won them when they last played Bristol. And they're playing a very strong Bristol side as well. So who knows? But yeah, credit to them. Great performance, great win.
And then you know, we get to, like I said, I think for the 3rd time now, probably my game of the weekend, that mid-table battle of Bath against Leicester, a game many thought, you know, Bath wouldn't come close to winning, to be honest, and I was one of those people. I thought Leicester, you know, they're on a great roll at the moment. You know, they've got incredible sort of internationals back into the side again, who are, you know, they've got Ford, they've got Genge doing things up front. And of course, one of our favorites, Jasper Wiese, who was yet again, you know, who just put in a great shift. I mean, what other words do we have for this guy other than unbelievable quality, amazing, fantastic? And it sucks that he was obviously on the losing end of that game, but credit to Bath. I think they hung in there all game. You know, they put pressure on Leicester really early in the first half. And yeah, congrats to Bath. I think they did a great job and ultimately deserved to win the game in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I said last week when we spoke that Bath's one of those sides that are a bit frustrating because they can be on fire or they can be a bit useless. So it's about for them trying to find that consistency. And I think that sort of game is almost a microcosm of who they are as a side. There were moments where they were really good. There were moments where, they were, coaches probably tearing their hair out. But I think that, as you say, stuck in, gritted it out, and came away with a win against a much more fancied Leicester side, who are under their own resurgence under Borthwick. And, that to match that sort of pack that you alluded to that Leicester are building is no mean feat on behalf of Bath. So congratulations to them. It was... I'd say, tied with the Quins game as my favorite game of the weekend, but a great effort. And again, I can't think of adjectives at this stage to describe Jasper Wiese. So just on a more technical aspect, I think one point to sort of point out about his game that I think is is perhaps why he's so successful beyond just his power and his that ability is preeminent. But for me, it's his speed off the back of the scrum, and we've seen this a number of times. And actually, the game against Connacht a few weeks ago was a really good demonstration of this. His ability to get around the opposition flankers and target the 10 channel, that soft shoulder, and make easy meters. That shouldn't be underestimated. He's quicker than many number eights playing, and being able to beat the opposition flankers is just a really good way of getting your team go forward. So I think that's one element of his game that isn't always discussed about, is just how quick this guy is. And obviously it makes a big help in defense as well. But another fantastic performance from him. He's my most likely non-capped Springbok to be called up for the Lions series, in the forwards certainly. I think he's an absolute genius, really. I love watching him play.
Yeah, he's a joy to watch, isn't he? And he's just such a great character too. And as you said, the ability to sort of come off the scrum and always make himself available. If you watch clips, I'll put up a clip here of one move in particular that I've found exciting, to say the least. But yeah, he's doing a great job, and I think Leicester are on the up, and they'll do great things if they, continue to sign players like Jasper Wiese. I just quickly wanted to do a quick wrap up of things over in the USA. Not much to say about things in Japan this weekend. Just the one try scorer there, because they're currently in the playoffs. So we had more of the sort of like lower tier teams come involved and or sort of get involved, and they played a couple of playoff games, and then it was just Bernard Janssen van Rensburg who scored for the Green Rockets there. But yeah, again, Japan very quiet. I'm still trying to understand that league, because they're playing 1 or 2 weeks of like what you would think is the normal league, and then the next week they're off for like 2-3 weeks, and then they're playing playoffs already. And so yeah, if anybody understands why that's happening, please let us know. But over in America, our Saffas were on form yet again. I mean, it's always great to see, it's always great to say, and ultimately it gives us a lot of enjoyment. And one particular player, which I will mention as probably my standout player, or maybe I'll wait till we discuss our standout players, but I mean, he was elusive, he was dangerous, he was moving from left to right, he was annoying defenders, he was quick, he was sharp. And at this stage of the podcast, if you can guess who it is, then congratulations when I reveal him a bit later.
I'm going to write down a name now.
Okay, you go ahead.
I think I know who you mean. So I'll have a little guess later on, but yeah, no, I think I know who you mean. But yeah, other listeners also have a guess.
Yeah,
you win nothing to get it right, but
you win a high five and a pat on the back, very socially distanced pat on the back. But yeah, look, Carl Meyer was brilliant again with the boot. I put up a clip of him slotting one of the best kicks I've seen from him, or any 10 in a while. And the reason I say that is because I'm not sure how many of you watched the game or managed to catch highlights, but I mean, had you seen the conditions of that game, I'm surprised they actually went ahead with the game, because the field it just looked an absolute mess. It was like World War III out there. I'm surprised they didn't start digging dungeons, for safety. But I mean, it was a horrible day to play rugby, put it that way. I mean, nonetheless, they played. Carl Meyer was on top form again for Nola Gold, who we keep mentioning week in, week out, so I'm assuming they're probably now going to be one of the favorites to probably win the MLR. I need to get that right. And San Diego, they had a great, impressive win over Utah. Utah probably favorites to win there. But yeah, Bian Bosson, again for San Diego, was on top form. I wanted to get your opinion on a lot of these guys playing in America, just quickly. Like, are they unforgotten players from South Africa that people tend to forget about because, they don't have access to watching these games, or what's the story?
I think America is an interesting one. I think America, or the MLR, is sort of where the Japanese top league was a number of years ago, where it's sort of this new thing. It's basically now for players who aren't really cutting it in the South African domestic scene, or else have had a long career and are now sort of winding down. But that's always how it starts. It starts as this sort of almost retirement competition for professional players, when you have someone like Chris Robshaw go across, and Beast was going to go play in DC, and for a time Nonu was going to play. So it always starts this way, and it attracts these big name stars. But gradually, as the league sort of comes into its own, it develops and it becomes stronger with professionalism and with time. And as it attracts fans and grows its support base and resources, and coaches get better and players get better, it becomes a serious league. So I think at the moment, yeah, no one's really paying attention to it. But who's to say where it can be 3 or 4 years down the line? I think that American rugby to me feels like it's at a bit of a takeoff juncture. I think there's definite potential for it to become a massive sport in America. Americans are sport obsessed, so why not rugby as well? They love sevens. Rugby can be a very technical and intricate sport, but actually it's not that difficult for viewers to get into it, particularly because Americans like contact sports. They've got a history of contact sports with sort of ice hockey and obviously American football and even lacrosse to a sort of degree. So, it's not a leap. I think genuinely it's a sport that I can see taking off, and therefore I can see the league getting stronger as time goes on. And eventually we will be talking about it in the same breath as competitions in Japan, and maybe one day as the same breath as competitions in Europe in terms of that quality. Now, it's probably a number of years away from that at this point, but there's nothing for me to say right now that it won't be possible to reach high levels of professionalism and quality in a very short period of time. I think it's on a very steep acceleration, and I'm really fascinated and intrigued and hopeful to see where it goes.
Yeah, and I'll just allude to that last point. We will continue to promote not only our players but the league in general as much as we can, for people to look at these superstars and up and coming rugby players and all sorts over there. So I mean, we'll definitely keep you posted on that. Now, is there anything that you wanted to add in the roundup before we move on to the next topic?
No, I think that's pretty much it for me. I mean, brief word on France. I mean, we can't cover everything, but yeah, just La Rochelle again, very, very good this weekend. Dylan Lates played very well. Toulouse played a very very good game. A lot of youngsters out there. No Intermac, no Colby, but they played very well. But yeah, no, I mean, top 14 was pretty fun to watch as well. The little bits that I did get to see. But again, unfortunately, we can't cover everything. We'd be sat here for hours and hours and hours. And we do have some interesting technical analysis or deep dives to get into with regards to a Rainbow Cup.
So now we're going to move on to the technical discussion, the topic deep dives that you mentioned. And I guess the biggest one of all is this new law variation that we're going to have in the Guinness Pro 14 Rainbow Cup. I believe I said that correct. Again, if anybody wants to correct me, go ahead. But why don't you start things off? Give us a bit of background again, just quickly, so that people have an understanding, and break it down for us, and then we'll go through each of the new variations.
Sure. So the Guinness Pro 14 Rainbow Cup, you are correct. That is the official term for sponsorship reasons, obviously, despite the fact, obviously, there are 16 teams playing, and despite the fact that we're not even sure if it's going to go ahead, but it is going to start for the first 3 weeks. But anyway, it's a bit of a mess. And they've not helped themselves by adding in 3 new law variations on top of everything that's already going on in the competition. We've spoken about law variations in the past. I think it was our first podcast where we talked about it when they were announced for Major League Rugby. I can't tell you how much I dislike all 3 of these, and I dislike them to varying degrees. So which one do you want to start with? Because I can speak at some length about all 3 of them. So you kick us off. Which one would you like discussing?
All right, let's start you off nice and easy. I will put this up on the screen so those of you can follow along with us. Let's start off with the goal line dropout. So I'll read it out for those listening on Spotify. For held up over the line knock-ons that occur in goal, or when the ball is grounded by a defending player after a kick through, the defending team will take a dropout from anywhere on the goal line. The dropout must occur without delay and cut across the goal line, traveling 5 meters.
To put it in plain English, it's basically anything which would have been a 22 is now a goal line dropout. So on the try line itself. And the other slight change is that if you're held up over the line as the attacking team, it's now a defending team's ball. It's not a 5 meter scrum for you. It's now a defending team's ball. And you have to have a dropout, and you can't have a dropout which just sort of trickles over the line. It needs to go 5 meters and probably further. So this is the one I find probably the least offensive of all the law changes. It doesn't mean I like it though. I still think it's a waste of time. I think it's a tampering and a tinkering which is completely unnecessary. I oppose the idea that if you as an attacking team works very hard to cross the try line and you get held up, that you suddenly lose the ball of its turnover. I don't think that's fair, to be honest with you. I understand why they've done it. Basically, they want to try and stop pick and go tries, because obviously if you pick and go, you're at risk of being held up over the line. And so they want to stop quote unquote boring play like Leinster or Exeter, who, you know, pick and go are sort of specialists from 5 meters out, just in case they get held up over the line. Um, you know, I guess it's personal preference. I just don't like it. No one's going to convince me otherwise. The other element of it is that they want to encourage people to drop back, because effectively what you're doing is you're penalizing the defensive team, because if the ball goes in goal and you dot it down, instead of being able to clear from your 22, you have to clear from your goal line, so you get a 22-meter penalty. So what it's also encouraging is teams to drop back players to field kicks, which they think is counteractively going to mean there's more space to attack. I've seen this law implemented in Super Rugby. I've not found it, in my view, to have had that impact. I didn't expect that it would. I think that conversely, it just rewards kicking more than anything. It just rewards teams for sort of kicking it long, and minimizes the potential impact of getting it wrong if it, you know, dribbles into the in-goal area. So I don't think it has that supposed impact of now everyone's going to suddenly run it and teams are going to drop players back. But whatever, it's a very technical one. Most fans probably won't care. I just sort of, I suppose I'm a bit of a traditionalist anyway, so it's not my favorite one, but also not probably the least offensive of the lot.
Let's go on to the captain's challenge. I'll read it out again. So each team is allowed one captain's challenge in the match. These can be used for a try scoring and foul play incidents, or to challenge any refereeing decision in the last 5 minutes of a match. The challenge will be referred to the TMO, who will review the footage, with referee making the final decision. Teams will have one challenge per game. If a challenge successfully overturns a decision, that team may keep their challenge. I'm not a fan of this at all. I think that it's completely just ruining the momentum of the last periods of the game. I just don't understand it. I mean, ultimately, there are officials in a game, and they need to be the ones who make the decisions, and they are the ones who are there to implement the rules. But I'd love to know your take on this.
Yeah, I'm in full 100% agreement with you. It's a cop-out as far as I'm concerned. If there's poor standards of refereeing, then fix that, address that. You know, it shouldn't be left to the players on the field to challenge. And there's a number of reasons for that. The first is that rugby is an incredibly technical and complex game, which has a myriad of laws. And we've discussed it a number of times, that it's down to interpretation on what you penalize so often. So let's say that an incident happens in the 76th minute of a game where a team scores a try, and the other team challenges, and they go, oh, well, you know, find something. The TMO and the referee could find something that's happened there, some technical infraction at a breakdown. Maybe the guy's off his feet, not supporting his weight in from the side. Maybe he's half a centimeter offside. Maybe the tackle slips a bit high. You can conjure a penalty almost out of any situation. And that is exactly what we saw in the latest game with the Crusaders, where the Crusaders had effectively lost the game, but then they had a last-ditch referral. It ruined the contest for the last 5 minutes, just because it was a complete shot in the dark hope that the referee would overturn a decision or find something to disallow. So I really, really dislike that. And then there's some other points on it that I don't really understand either. So you can challenge something at any time in the game if it's for foul play, or if it's in the act of scoring a try. Okay, fine. But then you can challenge also any decision within the last 5 minutes of the game. Or I think it's the last 5 minutes of a half in New Zealand. Maybe it's the last 5 minutes of the game for the Rainbow Cup. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, the point stands that why should an incorrect decision made in the 78th minute be any worse or more challengeable than an incorrect decision made in the 42nd minute? Yeah. It just seems to me really, really strange that they think, oh, well, it's more crucial that we get things right in the last minutes of the game than it is in any other stage of the game. For me, it shows that administrators have no confidence in their refereeing personnel, which is another topic of discussion that we could have, is the quality of refereeing and the lack of accountability for poor refereeing. But we'll save that for another day. But the captain's referral hasn't worked in Super Rugby. They've had a chance to look at how it's worked, and it hasn't. The fans don't like it. It's a waste of time while we go to the TMO to forensically analyze minutes of the game. It takes away the drama of a last minute, try or penalty or whatever, because now fans have to sit and wait and hope that it's not overturned. It's basically doing to rugby what VAR's done to football, to the VAR system in football that everyone hates as well. Yeah. It's even more subjective than that. So I see no reason for its inclusion. I think it's a total waste of time. I think that if your end goal is to make better refereeing decisions, then spend more time upskilling your referees and hold your referees who are poor to account. Coaches are held to account, players are held to account, journalists are held to account. Why are referees so exempt? If a referee has a poor performance, they should be able to be critiqued. Otherwise, you're never going to get improvement. Now, there's a difference, obviously, between critique and abuse, and we've talked about that a number of times, and unfortunately, way too many people stray over that line. But ultimately, if you want to drive higher standards in refereeing, or at least in terms of correct decision-making, don't put the power in the hands of the players. Just start upskilling your referees. Anyway, I think it's a ludicrous introduction. Don't like it very much.
So in conclusion, we don't like the rule very much at all. It's killing the game. We're ultimately giving players more power to abuse or sort of challenge the ref's decision, when ultimately at the very beginning of this point, we said that TMOs and officials in general are there to curate the game under their rules, under the laws of the game of rugby. And if you don't have any faith in your officials, then send them back to a school or wherever they learn, and get people who understand the game and who are not afraid to implement those rules. I think we just need a school of, like, I think Nigel Owens needs to open up a school or something and just say, look, the school of Nigel Owens, we can tweet him and see if he's interested in that. But yeah, a no nonsense referee who says it like it is. Do you know what? These are the rules. This is my decision. Move on with the game. And like you said, it's killing the that intensity that we all love as fans at the beginning, at the end of a game. 4 minutes out, 2 points behind, and ultimately you're going to win the game by your team defending so well. Attack are hitting you, and they're like half a meter out from the line, and your team's doing the most defending they've done all game. But now one of these captain's challenges comes in, it kills the momentum, it kills the mood, and it just kills the interest in the game, to be honest. One that I'm completely against, and probably the one that I've seen debated the most, certainly in my family it was, is the red card. For red cards, the offending player will leave the field of play as usual, but after 20 minutes, the team can replace the player with one of their nominated substitutes. The clock for the 20-minute period will be managed in the same way as the sin bin and will pause during stoppages in play. If someone makes a mistake, we saw this with Rob Dupree yesterday. He knew he made the mistake. He didn't even argue. He apologized to the player and walked off. And Sale had to find a way, to play a further 50-something minutes with 14 men. And teams have been training that way. They've been, initiated in a way that this is, it can happen in the game, and you ultimately have to find a way to play with 14 men. But now you're telling me that, okay, fair enough, the person who's made or who's being punished can't take part in the game anymore, but you can still substitute him for someone else. I can sort of see what they're trying to do, but it doesn't make sense. Where do you think they're going with this one?
Okay, but let's break it down and let's try and understand the thinking behind it, because there's a lot to be said on this one, and there's been a lot of discussion on this. I should start by saying I completely agree with you. I think the 20-minute red card is a terrible idea, and I'll explain why in due course. But let's try and understand the thinking of the administrators. So effectively, they're sort of following this narrative that red cards ruin contests, and that we don't want to see players sent off, and we don't want to see teams penalized in that way for an extended period of time, because it effectively seals the contest. Now, that's not true. For a start, Sale played almost 60 minutes with 14 men and they won the game. And there's just one anecdotal example, but we've seen time and time again teams are a lot better now at dealing with having 14 men than they've ever been in the past. And having a red card doesn't necessarily seal the deal, as it were, in terms of the contest. I don't think it does ruin the contest. I think that's a very helpful straw man that people use and administrators use to, it's a sort of a coat peg on which they're hanging this debate. And I don't think it's fair. I think it's a fallacy. But anyway, so the thinking for administrators is obviously we want to have a contest between two teams. An act of foul play shouldn't debilitate the team as a whole. Obviously, you still sanction that player. They still have to leave the field. They can't return. The team can bring on a substitute in 20 minutes. So the team is still impacted more than a yellow card because it's 20 minutes, not 10, but they can eventually bring someone on. So that's the thinking behind it. Now, I'm going to tell you now why that's not going to work, or for all the reasons why I think it's a joke, frankly. For a start, I think the psychology of why they've introduced this has been to try and solve a problem that they themselves created. Okay, and this is being quite cynical now. But from my perspective, what happened is rugby collectively shat its pants with the CTE stuff which is going on and the head injury worries and the potential litigation being brought against World Rugby and the English Rugby Union and the Welsh Rugby Union. So they reacted to this upcoming potential group litigation by giving the directive to referees, we start clamping down on head injuries now. Everything which goes near the head is a red card immediately. So what you can expect, obviously, is that there was a massive proliferation of red cards, which we can statistically see how many there's been an explosion. You know, referees have been told to implement this no leniency to any head contact framework, and they followed it. So we've seen loads and loads of red cards. But what we've also seen is a lot of teething problems, as you can expect, right? So we've seen loads of inconsistency in how red cards are applied. We've seen players being sent off for very soft challenges. We've seen players escape sanction completely for horrific challenges. Basically, the refereeing teams and TMOs are still struggling to find their feet in implementing this framework. So there's been inconsistency. And what happens when there's inconsistency in sport? There's outcry from partisan fans, right? If your team is at the receiving end of a bad decision and an inconsistent decision, you're going to voice that frustration. So we've seen two things here. We've seen one is that there's been a lot more red cards, and two, we've seen that there's a lot more discontent from fans as a result of those red cards. So World Rugby has now seen this, or the games administrators have seen this upset, and they've again acted reactively and gone, well, okay, since we can't backtrack on the red card sort of threshold for head injuries, what we're going to do is just limit the impact of red cards. And so let's just make them 20 minutes instead. So it's a complete backwardsly engineered logic, if it's from my perspective, and it's the reason that they've done this. Basically, they've gone, we're gonna have loads more red cards in games, so let's just limit the impact of them. Now, this seems to me to act completely counterintuitively to what they're trying to do. You know, when we look at why red cards exist in games, they exist as a sanction to the player and to the team to try and discourage reckless or dangerous behavior. Red cards, so yellow cards still get given for technical infractions and penalties get given for technical infractions. Red cards, and I'm talking straight red cards, they get given for dangerous or reckless play in order to protect the players, right? So by reducing the negative, debilitating impact of a red card, all that you're effectively doing is you're making it less of a sanction. And therefore, if you make anything less of a sanction, it's more likely to happen. You can say, well, players are still getting sent off, but remember that it becomes less of a sanction for the team as a whole. So if I'm a rugby coach and I'm going, oh, well, the team doesn't suffer as much if a player gets red carded. Where is my incentive as a coach to coach players not to act in a dangerous way? So, for example, rucks. We've heard coaches jokingly refer to yellow cards and red cards for players diving into the rucks as speeding tickets because they're coaching them to go all out and clean that ruck. That's how players have been coached for 10, 15 years. For as long, when I played rugby, that's what you're told. Your coach tells you, go in there, fly in, take a guy out, just clean that ball somehow. And that's how players have been coached to professional levels, right? We can't do that anymore. But there's no incentive for coaches from a young age to tell players not to do that if you're lessening the impact on the team as a whole by reducing the red card impact. Now, the only point which I guess comes up from time to time on this debate that the other side has to offer is they say, well, referees will feel more empowered to give red cards now that they know it's not as debilitating, so they won't feel as on the hook if they make a wrong decision, so they're more likely to sanction foul play. Well, again, that's solving a problem which can be solved in a different way, and it's creating a myriad of other problems. For a start, a referee needs to be brave. It's a thankless career, it really is, but referees need to be brave, and they're empowered to be brave, and they need to make those calls regardless of whether they think, oh wow, the fans are going to hate me, or what's going to happen. If they think something merits a red card, they need to give a red card. That should be the default position. So telling me that it's going to empower them to give more red cards is, I don't believe it, frankly. We've not exactly seen few red cards. There have been plenty. So I don't really buy into that argument that actually it's just going to, create more red cards being given and drive disciplinary changes that way. I think that's untrue as well. So no, I think this is not only a bad law introduction, I think this is a dangerous one, because ultimately, if you reduce the sanction for something like this, you're just going to not discourage dangerous behavior enough. And what you're ultimately doing is you're putting players at risk. I don't necessarily buy this argument that teams are going to target star players now. I mean, that's really cynical, and I think that's bullshit. But unintentional acts of foul play, or charging into rucks, stuff like that's not going to change by reducing the sanction. It can't. It's completely illogical. And that's exactly what this law is. To finish now, I've been ranting for way too long, but it is completely illogical and it's dangerous.
But I had one more question for you on this. I mean, is the offending player then still going to be banned for 3-4 games after that? Would that still be the case then?
Yeah, and I mean that's a whole other thing, because yes, they will still, if you get a red card, you'll still go through the sanctioning process. So what they're trying to do is they're just trying to change the sanction for the team and not for the player. So the player's off still. You're still going to get your 3-game ban, or whatever the citing commission decides to give you, depending on what flavor biscuits you bring. It's supposed to, the logic is that it's going to penalize the player without penalizing the team itself, and therefore without penalizing the wider spectacle and the fans. But I just think that if they'd spent one iota of time just considering what the long-term implications of this are, and also the current climate, they'd have just come to a different conclusion. And it really saddens me to see competition after competition introduce this variation. I think it is dangerous, and I think it's stupidly dangerous.
It will be interesting to see, come one of the most important finals in any team's history, and this incident happens. You think, wow, we're now at an advantage because we're playing 14 men for the last 20 minutes of a game. And then in the last minute, someone else comes on to replace that offending player, and they end up being the same person who intercepts and scores a winning try or something. It's not going to work. I think none of these are going to work. Some of these have been implemented in Super Rugby, or some or all of them actually, and they're ultimately at the end of the day not working. I get that, with law variations, we're trying to ensure that player safety is number one priority. We're trying to ensure that the TMOs and all the officials are implementing all the right rules, using their own intuition, saying, you know what, I think this is a red card, you need to be off. I think this was a high tackle. TMO, do you agree? Is there anything there that I can maybe mitigate it down to a yellow or something? The game is quite obviously clearly changing, and along with those changes, the laws are changing, and I don't know, it sets up a lot of debate for years to come, for sure, because once this does start happening in very important, critical, crucial moments in a game, then we'll look back at this moment and go, do you know what? We told you guys ages ago, this is a stupid idea. What are you doing? Right. Let's quickly discuss. We have a lot to discuss about the Lions, and then we can probably just chat about our Saffa of the week. If you want to update us on what's happening with the Lions tour, I know that the update that I've seen this week was that they are going to change the venues. I think what they're trying to do is obviously avoid as much travel as possible. So what we're seeing is that they're going to be playing one test in Cape Town on July the 24th, and then the second and third tests are to be played in Joburg on the 31st of July, and then the following weekend on August the 7th. So again, purely just to avoid all the travel. Are changing the venues going to play an impact at all, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think they're sort of trying to minimize travel while still keeping the feel of it being a tour, you know. So you can't just have it one bio bubble in one location, because then it does feel a bit cheap. So I understand why they've gone north, south, Cape Town, Joburg. All the warm up games will be at Cape Town in the first test, and then the big ones, obviously, the two tests will be well, they're saying Johannesburg. I suspect it'll be first test Cape Town Stadium, second test will be probably Soccer City in Soweto. I think it's FNB Stadium is now what it's called. And then the third one will probably be Ellis Park or Emirates Airline Park for sponsorship reasons, obviously. So to your point, do I think this will change anything? Obviously, that there's the altitude factor. Playing two tests at altitude is obviously a good result, but they were always going to do that anyway. It would have been nice for them to start with the two tests at altitude if it were up to me. But ultimately, I don't think it'll be that much of an issue. And I also think the Lions are going to be ready for the altitude as well. I think that they said they're going to do, low oxygen training. You can do that some way, and these weird sort of there's ways to do it now. And I think that's obviously a technology that they'll be looking into, because we do know that it plays its part. There's a really fun little element that the Bulls have done actually at Loftus, and I sort of just really have to rate the shithousery. Is in the tunnel as you walk out, there's a big sign which they list what the altitude is, and I think it's something like 1,100 meters above sea level, and it just says 1,100 meters altitude. It matters, which I think is just a brilliant bit of psychological trickery as teams are coming out of the tunnel. So I think that's really funny. So obviously altitude plays its part. I don't think it'll be a massive impact on the series as a whole. Probably a good thing. Two bio bubbles, more secure. Yeah.
Go back to what you were saying. The training that they're doing in Jersey at the moment is something similar to what you would be when you're training to do like a base camp at Everest or something. So it's purely, they've got all these breathing coaches in there. They've got all these guys who are, I think, like meditation coaches and all sorts of, they're doing everything they possibly can just to try and beat the Springboks at altitude. So good luck to that, or good luck to them with that. Be interesting to see if it pays off.
Yeah, just a few sort of interesting tidbits. Well, for a start, I think I can't remember if we mentioned this before, but obviously what is the likelihood of crowds is a big one to talk about. We don't know. Basically, South African Rugby, as part of wider sports federations in South Africa, have submitted an appeal to the government, or with a sort of a plan for how they would reintegrate fans into sporting stadiums. I think they're really pushing for 25% capacity at least, 25 to 50. I don't think they'll get 50. I think they'll be very lucky to get 25, but the hope is that they'll get something, which would be brilliant. But I think a lot will depend, obviously, on what the COVID situation is there at the time. But it is something which is a potential. And then just quickly on the coaching, I saw that Schalk Brits, former Springbok hooker, World Cup winner Schalk Brits, he's come out this week and said that it's a mistake, or rather a missed opportunity by Warren Gatland not to involve Matt Proudfoot, who was obviously the South African World Cup winning forwards coach and is now with England as their forwards coach. Just what he brings, obviously, in terms of knowing Rossi, knowing the players, knowing the South African psyche. And I'm not sure if it is a missed opportunity, but I do sort of feel that he does have that sort of inside line. There have been talks about Warren Gatland bringing in other coaches later down the line. So he's got his core coaching team, but bringing in a few technical analysts or whatever experts a bit further down. And one name that's been floated, but it always seems to get floated, is obviously the Crusaders, is Scott Robertson, Razor Robertson. I'm not sure how likely that is. I think it's just talk as usual, but it would be interesting to see. Maybe he does get him involved.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he's there to just teach them a bit of breakdancing, at halftime if they're down 15-12 against the Springboks. But yeah, other than that, I've seen a lot of fun being put behind the coaching selection of the Lions. We won't go into too much detail about that, but it's great to see that finally, the coaches are being announced. We've got teams being announced in less than a month, hopefully both squads. But yeah, as we edge closer and closer to the Lions tour, we are going to obviously be breaking down each test when it gets to that point, and then obviously our squads closer to the time. But yeah, I'm excited for the tour. I genuinely can't wait. I do personally love reading about all these little issues that the Lions are having. There were talks of like possibly not even being Premiership players at one point. It's
That
ridiculous.
ongoing fallout, that whole
Yeah,
ongoing fallout between Premiership Rugby and the Lions and Warren Gatland is it's something that I'm not really going to touch upon now. We can perhaps cover it next week and we'll see how it all unfolds. But it is just frustrating for fans and I'm sure for players as well. And that standoff seems to be so petty, really.
yeah.
Particularly for the teams that aren't actually going to be involved in the finals. Why can't they release their play? It's anyway. We'll cover it in depth another time because there is a lot to discuss there, and it's probably not worth trying to cover it very briefly now.
That being said, we move on to our Saffa of the week. Congrats to those of you who, well, I should probably say who mine is first, but I'll have a go at guessing who yours is.
Okay, guess mine, and I'll guess yours.
Right. I want to say that your Saffa of the week was Wilco Low.
Oh, spot on. Spot on. I have no idea how you got that. I thought you would have guessed Dan Duprier, but no, Wilco Low is my Saffa of the week.
I'm not just saying that. I'm just saying I honestly had no idea who your player of the week was, but I think purely because he was, awarded his first try for Quins. He played a phenomenal game again, and he's finally getting into that groove. As you said earlier, playing alongside Marla, and I think what they're sort of rubbing off each other at the moment at Quins is just unstoppable, and it was purely just a guess, but only because he would have been mine, had it not been for some of the class acts that I saw over in America. But if anybody else guessed AP's player of the week, congratulations. But AP, tell us why Wilco Low is your Saffa player of the week.
Yeah, no, for me, Wilco Low, I mean, he's really come into his own as Harlequins, as you've mentioned. I'll not repeat myself too much, but I do think that he could be a bit of a dark horse for South Africa. He's obviously been capped by South Africa before. And I think that what we're likely to see on the tight head side is obviously Fransman Araba is your first choice. Trevor Nyakane is probably is going to be on the bench. But then within the squad, there's space for one more tight head and probably one player who can play both loose head and tight head. So Thomas du Toit, I think, will be there as that sort of swing prop who can play both loose head and tight head as the situation demands. But then there is still space in the squad, I think, for one more. And last time round, it was Vincent Koch, who was excellent. However, I think that he might have fallen slightly off the radar with Saracens being relegated, and so his stock might have gone down slightly. So I think that Wilco Low is a real outside bet, has a chance to sort of put his hand up. It's not that clear on the domestic scene who's really making waves, but I think here at least it's clear to me that Wilco Low has been exceptional, most of the season really for Quins, but he really shone in that game. Congratulations to him. He's my Saffa of the week. I think yours is Cecil Africa. Have I got that right?
You have 100%.
Yeah, I thought it might be. Yeah, no, just when you were, I mean, I didn't catch much, rugby in America this week, but the little few highlights I did see, it was just Cecil tearing it up, and everything you said there was about sort of being slick and quick and accurate. That just defines him, from his sevens days. He's had that ability, and he's a real class operator. And I will rewatch the game now that I have a bit of time. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see why you picked Cecil.
His game is extremely rapid, and what he did against Utah was actually quite embarrassing for Utah. He would take defense. When I posted a clip of one of the many tries he set up this weekend, he didn't score himself, but he is quite clearly a team player, and he reads the running game so well. He could snap ankles at a moment's brace, and that's what he did. Him and Bian Bosson, I need to give him a shout out to, was absolutely exceptional too. His support play alongside Cecil on his shoulder all game was phenomenal, and he just was. It was sad to see that he didn't score, but what he did for the team and the amount of tries that he set up and the amount of defenses he just managed to break through was ridiculous. So, congrats to San Diego. It was a really important win for them, and he was definitely my Saffa of the week.
Brilliant. So I guess all that's left now is to say thank you to everybody who's watched the show, and longtime supporters and new supporters as well. Please like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. And wherever you listen and watch your podcasts and your shows, we'll be there. So thank you for your continued support. And from my end, that's everything.
As AB said, we just wanted to thank absolutely everybody for being here. If you do, like any of the content that you see, be sure to subscribe, like, and share. But just for me personally, I wanted to thank AP for being here. It's now the 4th episode. Your knowledge about rugby is absolutely incredible, and I'm genuinely so proud and privileged to have you on here. And to all the new listeners, if you're just listening to us or watching us for the first time, welcome. We should have probably said that at the beginning, but thank you for making it to the end of the episode. But yeah, as AP said, we're truly grateful, and yeah, we'll catch you in the next one.
Cheers, guys.